Hey, you're listening to the 5 for 5 show from Boombox Music Talk.
And for my birthday, he sends me a cassette tape, and it's Billy Cobham's Glass Menagerie. It's like this amazing jazz guy. And John's like, hey, you learned this, then you can be really good. And I listened to it like 2 times, and I was like, fuck you.
Welcome to Boombox Music Talk. I'm Marc.
And I'm Krish.
And today on the 5 for 5 show, we have a photographic memory.
Someone intimately familiar with the sound of a cowbell.
Codename Bones, who doesn't like big pants.
Sometimes a double for the Drogan's decoder wheel.
One of the 4 infamous Bedinghaus boys.
And a brilliant drummer.
Of course, we're talking about my brother Bret, right?
Brother Bret.
Brother Bret. Brother Bret Bones.
Bret Bones, Bedinghaus, Bedinghaus, Bret Bones, Bedinghaus, Bones, Bret.
Talking about what I'm doing. Yep.
Hey, why don't you sell your band CDs here?
That is a brilliant idea. I cannot believe I didn't think of that. I have been writing a lot of songs about shining shoes lately. I tend to write about what I'm doing. Talking about, writing about what I'm doing. Now I'm singing about, talking about, writing about what I'm doing.
Like Andy on Parks and Rec. Which is kind of funny because the way Andy sings on Parks and Rec, although he can sing, you know, when he wants to, but
Who,
the
Bret?
way he kind of Andy on that show,
no, yeah,
the way
sure.
he kind of, it's very lazy, kind of.
It's very folky.
That's Bret's singing. You know what I mean? Out of
Loose.
all of us, yeah,
It's loose.
yeah. He can carry a little bit of a tune, but we never gave him a mic. But when he's having fun
in the background,
it's funny. Off tape a minute ago, you were talking about, the thing that's interesting that we have in common is how Bret's wife, Amy, and you went to school together, and, her mom knew your family, your mom and your grandmother, and worked together. And
yeah, Amy and I were in choir together.
I forget about that one.
Yeah, and we had a lot of mutual friends. We didn't necessarily hang out closely. I was an introvert anyway, so I didn't hang out with many people closely. But
yeah, right.
But her mother was employed by my grandmother for years and years, and a long time before I even knew. Before I made the connection that her mother was her mother.
Yeah.
And then my stepdad was...
Your mother's your mom?
How did that happen?
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I didn't put that together.
If I was your mother, would you let me hold your hand? Would you say you were my baby? Would you always be my friend? Was your mother?
Did y'all know that? Did y'all know her mom was her mother? Nobody told me.
So whenever you and I became acquainted and I realized that, your brother was married to her, I was like, wow, that's really... And that we don't even live...
Did they get me confused? I'm married to the Bedinghaus. You're married to... It better not be... Don't say Marc. How many letters in the name? 4. No, you better not be.
Oh my God, that would be so funny. That's got to go in subtle absurdities.
Well, and what's funny about that too is I wonder, as we've done this podcast, it's been fun to look at all the different influences, right? And that's one reason why I wanted to do this 5 for 5 show on his influential drummers and ours as well. Of course, this will be a modified 5 for 5. We'll do ours at a later date. Brett has a lot to say.
Yeah, he filled the time very well.
Yeah, but it was all interesting stuff, and I didn't want to cut a lot of it out. And I look at all these influences outside of my family a lot of times because it's your family. You just don't think about that side of things. But I shared a bedroom with Bret growing up, so I wonder how many things I got that are actually from him too.
Yeah,
that maybe I thought it came from my dad or whoever.
Yeah. What's your age difference?
5 or 6 years.
Oh yeah, that's pretty significant.
Or maybe 6 years, I think.
At a young age.
Yeah.
So he was imparting.
He was old enough that if I jumped up on his bed, because we had 2 twin beds, that he could just slap me, and I would go flying off the bed. I know that for a fact.
That's funny. So, so I mean, that's a big enough age gap that he would be imparting his, knowledge on to you, and that you're impressionable enough to be soaking it up like a sponge.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's funny because, so where Bret fits in, it's me and then Bret 6 years later or whatever, and Troy 1 year, and they played in a band together called Wizard. Some of you might have heard us reference in Kirk's episode. And then our brother John was like another 6 or 7 years, right? So growing up, John was like the mythical character that was out in California going to MI, and
he was like doing all the cool stuff. Yeah.
And he would come back
living
in every once in a while,
dream.
be like, hey, look at me. Look how good I am. All right, see you. And then fly away like Superman.
He would appreciate that description.
Yeah. But, but it was still kind of this influence from that perspective, right?
But less of it. It was quality versus quantity.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It was just always funny because, Bret's always kind of been a little bit of the crazy one, the wild one. He's the
wild child.
My mom was convinced that my brother Bret and my dad were going down in a blaze of glory. And one of my favorite memories of them and their many cowboy adventures was the time they were out fishing in 40-degree weather and a big storm blew in. Well, they were in a small boat with huge waves and eventually realized they weren't going to make it back to the loading dock before getting capsized. So through sheer force of will, they managed to make their way to a cove and get to shore. Shivering and almost hypothermic, they pulled a gas tank out to help build a fire, stripped down to their underwear, and try to warm up. Now keep in mind, Bret was also trying to be a rock star and had long blonde hair at the time. Well, another boat comes by, before they can wave them over, they speed off. But they survive the night, and the next day when they make it back to the marina, they see the same guys in the boat from before. And the guys say, "Oh shit, we're so sorry. We saw your long blonde hair and thought it was a couple about to get busy, so we hightailed it out of there."
He's the cowboy of the bunch too. Like he's the one that always went out and hunted and fished with my dad and stuff. And the rest of us didn't really want to do that. We didn't do cowboy things. We wanted to do city folk things. But Bret liked to do that kind of stuff. But you know, he was blonde hair, blue eyes. You know, we were all brown hair and brown eyes, and so he was very much the one I feel like that was probably, I don't know, I wouldn't say trying to get attention necessarily, but
knew where it was going to be.
Yeah,
at least opportunistic in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, like he was probably not just there for those activities. He was there for quality time, and y'all were like, fuck this, we don't want to kill animals for quality time. That's not a good trade-off. In our minds.
Yep, exactly.
The ones I'm thinking of.
Oh, but speaking of being kind of the one that was different or whatever too, he was the drummer.
You're down, but don't break me. You're down, but don't. You're down, but don't break me. You're down, but don't. You're down, but don't break me. Don't break me. Don't break me. You're down, but don't break me. Don't break me. Don't break me.
Right, like all of us played string instruments, guitar,
strings, and
and so I don't know, and I feel like I'm such a rhythmic person too, my whole life, and I wonder those little things. Like I wonder if I didn't give it as much attention as it probably deserved in terms of influencing me, rooming my life with a drummer. You know what I mean? I've always been drawn to that. You
have, but you also are very melodic too. You have that very, that's the difference. Like, Bret's not the same in that way.
Yeah, right.
He's very focused on
he's very steady.
The rhythm, the beat, capturing that aspect. Yeah. You are, so yes, you had that.
Feelings!
From Family Guy.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly right. And what I was about to say was, yes, you had an influence of him, but then feelings.
Yep, exactly.
So you balanced that out and you pursued other more not melancholy, but just
well, that's probably right.
Well, yeah, more melancholy but heartfelt, romantic. You were romantic at heart, so you had a different. Bret just wanted to be cool,
right?
You wanted to be cool and be in love, or appreciate the aspect of love.
I wanted to have star-crossed lovers.
She's gone out of my life. I was wrong. I'm to blame. I was so untrue. I can live without love. And my life.
All the cool words associated
Can't
to
be
love.
Together
and all the
I was such a sucker for those kind of
the
stories.
Strife
back in the day.
of love, the fight of love.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this process has been fun to learn about people that aren't as close to us or subjects, that we're just researching, as much as just each other and people that we're close with, like family, to see like what got, because I played in many bands with Bret. And so I had that side of him, but it was later in in life, and so it's fun to kind of analyze what got him to that point and how that merged with Core Factor and influenced that
his
project.
Perception
and
of
everything.
his experience is going to be a little, different than what you observed playing with him, because that's just one aspect. It's one facet of, the overall picture. And so now this production gives the opportunity to break that down and get to know, the journey from a different aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you'll hear in these episodes about the two big forces for him was the spectacle
Drum solo in a giant spinning steel cage. Wow.
and the technical. That's what it came down to, those two sides of things.
The spectacle of the technical.
And so, for him, it was about the show. And so we jived real well together that way. We both believed in that. But it takes somebody that appreciates a certain level of technicality to be able to play with a click and do the things you have to do as a drummer.
Yeah.
That isn't partaking in the show as much, because you've got to kind of be the thing that holds everything together and stay with that click.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, and he blended those two things together really well and allowed me to go do my thing, that I really enjoyed doing. And he's kind of been that for me for most of my life, just kind of helping doing stuff.
Helping doing stuff.
Talking about, writing about what I'm doing.
That's Bret. He's gonna help in doing stuff. So we'll go ahead and get this episode rolling. I'm really excited to dive into his top 5 influential drummers. So for Boombox Music Talk, I'm Mark,
And I'm Krish.
and we urge you to enjoy the journey.
It stays in.
Mr. Bret Bedinghaus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Do you know what a Drogan's decoder wheel is?
I don't, but it is very intriguing.
Do you remember decoder wheels in general? Like they used to
Yes.
come in cereal boxes? Yeah.
Well, actually, that must have been a thing of you guys' time, because
Of days of yore.
I either didn't buy the right cereal that came in, or I didn't get a decoder wheel.
Aw.
I would have been super stoked about that too, because I loved Spy Gear and
Well, they're generally
Ancient.
used most often to decode triple scrambled microwave transmissions.
Between two soldiers talking in Mandarin Chinese.
Well, the Chinese were only using a simple polyphonetically grouped 20 square digit key transposed in booster photonic form with multiple nulls. We broke it with this.
A Drogan's decoder wheel? They put these things into cereal boxes for kids.
Yeah, I found it in a box of Lucky Charms.
There you go. Something of that nature. Yeah, it's from Spies Like Us. Dan Aykroyd's character.
Oh,
We watched
okay.
it somewhat recently.
a couple
in the
months ago, right?
Yeah, maybe a year, but
Really?
yeah. Spies Like Us. Speaking of the power of sound, that movie and Fletch, Bret and I used to go to sleep to many nights in the room, and I would just listen to it. Just
funny.
audio. I mean, it'd be
You know-
on, but I wouldn't watch it a lot.
I bet something like that was probably kind of reminiscent, like to hearing the radio, like a radio
Yeah.
version of that,
Yeah.
almost like back
Well,
in the
you've seen it so many
50s or
times, you
something.
know all the images. So it's very easy to put it all together, and it's funny every single time.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember
really enjoyed
that
it.
movie probably being one of the earliest moments that I realized what the power of sound was and what the power of not sound was. Not those moments where you don't have anything playing, like in music, where you have the moment where the music quits before it kicks in on the chorus, and it's just the vocals, right?
Everybody gets high. Everybody gets low. Everybody gets.
It's those kinds of moments. It's the same thing, because I can't remember Chevy's character's name in the movie, though. Anyway, when he's doing a symposium, answering questions to reporters, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's
No,
the
it acts like
spokesman.
Mike's cutting out. I'm awfully sorry.
Yeah, welcome to the Bedinghaus. my brother band, long time ago.
How can you say we aren't spending millions on spraying extensive contamination in the grain fields of southern Argentina?
The state ever... Microphone's cutting out on us, so I'm awfully sorry. However, it's an unstate, so I must go.
And he would just do that, and he wouldn't ever really say anything, so he wouldn't give him any details. But I realized at that moment, wow, the things that you don't say are pretty impactful too.
It's the yada, 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 you know?
I do, ironically, though, I remember the character's name in the movie Fletch.
I think that was
Irwin M. Fletcher.
That talk about ASMR. The first 10 minutes of that movie was just that doo-dee. Well, I was about to do Beverly Hills Cop. But it's the same. It's a similar feel of a little bit. You know, that little background music.
And he's walking on the beach.
Yes. You hear the sounds of the beach and seagulls and water going. Then he goes under the bridge and you hear kind of the muffled sound of people on the bridge and just perfect. I mean, I barely ever made it past probably the first 5 minutes.
No, it was unnecessary.
What, the rest of the movie?
Well, I mean, I'm sure the writers felt that it was necessary. No, I just mean because it was this mood thing of you heard that intro, and I would just start laughing just because I knew how funny it was going to be in the next 30 seconds.
And you were anticipating, that joyful.
Still to this day, almost not a week goes by, I feel like I don't make the joke of...
He does. Even I found myself thinking that in my head a lot of times.
Even when I don't say it?
In that voice, yeah.
Anyway, so I thought it would be really cool to have you in. And because, I mean, you are my brother. We've played in many bands together.
That's true.
And I think, when I got your list, so... To dive into kind of what your influences were was interesting just to have it come back to me because I kind of felt some of them, but some of them not necessarily. And so anyway, I thought it'd be cool to kind of go through some influential drummers. It's going to be a modified 5 for 5 today. There was a lot to unpack on this list, so we made the decision, an executive decision.
Well, we knew Bret was going to have lots to say, so we wanted to give him the opportunity.
Well, I will give it to Chris. She's the one that came to me and was like, hey, there's a lot here. She always has to reel me back. I'm like, I wrote down 472 things I'm going to do today. She's like, well, how about we just start with one and see how you're doing by noon?
Yeah.
Normally I don't have that
one
thing
thing done. We're going to shoot for 3.
Yeah.
I have, on occasion, been accused of talking a little much.
I mean, me too. I think it's a Bedinghaus trait.
Well, it's just because everything I have to say is important.
That's just true.
And often, really most often, more important than what anyone else has to say. No, this is not grade school, how appropriate etiquette. All that stuff was lost on me. Say whatever you can to make the person you're talking to look stupid.
Or feel uncomfortable.
Where they just outright quit and walk away. And
and you win.
And I win. Yeah, I do. I win every single time.
It's funny that he's talking like that, like, I'll offend you, whatever, because he used to get really frustrated at Drew and I when we would play shows and just sit up there and do a George Carlin curse words routine.
I get tired of people talking about bad words and bad language. Bullshit. It's the context that makes them good or bad. The context that makes
for 10 minutes in between each song, and he'd be like, dude, can you just not say fuck every other third word?
You're like, no, it's impossible.
No, it has to come out.
We're artists.
Well, this list, enter segue. It's funny that you say that because this list kind of represents my perspective on that take on what live rock and roll is supposed to be. And my drumming has been more influenced by what the spectacle and the show and all these things, just as much as capabilities and technique. you'll see on the list, it's I kind of waffle back and forth, right? I get this thing that's like this huge mega impact kind of, whether it's a performance or a character or whatever, and then you see I get kind of sucked back in by technical capabilities, and I kind of waffle back and forth, and I have, for 35 years, what inspires me to play is a little different.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's
given
morphed over
that
time.
moment,
yeah,
and especially now than it was 30 years ago or 5 years ago, and so the list kind of represents a little bit of that too, where it's pretty obvious what things are impactful and make me go, oh yeah, that's cool, I want to do that. So it's a good segue.
Yeah,
that wasn't even on your notes, was it?
Nope.
Your perceptions too at different points in your life and experiences at that time also kind of put you, or the universal you, into different mindsets, so now as a more knowledgeable, musician, you are going to hear things differently, feel things differently, experience things differently than 20 years ago.
And just as an older man, you listen for different things too now, or not necessarily now, but just as you grew.
Well, yeah, what the drums were supposed to sound like, what they meant to the song, what was, playing versus overplaying, and I think your perspective of those things changes along the way. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that, for me, it always kind of gets rooted back into, the spectacle of the show and the performance. And I wanted, even playing in a small club, I wanted
the
it to be like,
right?
This, you come out and you got this well-timed, well-choreographed display as much as, hey, here are these notes that I'm going to play. And I think that's been a good thing for me, but it's definitely been a bad thing for my capabilities over the years, because I overlook sometimes the technicalities of playing and didn't really embrace, how do I get to this next level consistently. It was only at times that technique and skill kind of sucked me in versus just this overall sound of this massive song. Performance and the lights and all these things that were, to me, what made up what drumming was.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. I've often wondered, I want to get your honest, true kind of opinion on this. Do you ever feel like liking that well choreographed show, though, sometimes put you in a box? Because part of us playing in Core Factor, it was the positive and the negative all wrapped in one, where it was so awesome to be able to have cool beats and synth playing right with us and just perfectly timed cool stuff like that. But Bret had to suffer some for that, because he had to sit there and listen to what we used, a cowbell, so it was loud enough in his ears, but keeping the click track while we played. And so there's always going to be this just little bit of hesitation to kind of break out and just be free, or even a little bit, Do you ever kind of feel like that held you back? I feel like it probably did.
It held me back playing wise, obviously, because I had to, in my mind's eye, I had to fit this very specific role. And really even more detrimental to that is when you do that, now you're literally standing on the razor's edge. Because I'm not having any fun, like when you're just jamming and you just kind of get in this moment. You're trying to put on a performance, and that in and of itself is fun. But what happens when the performance is not perfect? It's now just complete shit.
Right.
If we didn't pull it off exactly the way it was supposed to be, now all of a sudden it's just garbage to me.
Whereas if you're not playing with that, sometimes those moments that go off track are the cool things.
They almost always are.
To do that,
They almost always are, and there's no real method to kind of respond to the crowd in the same way that you can when you kind of let that all just kind of happen organically.
I've always personally wrestled with it, because me as a human, I mean, Chris, you know this, I'm best when I'm just kind of ad-libbing and just responding
It's actually pretty amazing.
and riffing.
It's like
you know.
his superpower.
When I tried it, when
Winging
we
it.
first started recording the podcast, and I would have these detailed outlines, and it never
live up
felt
to it.
natural. Yeah, exactly. And also, it's like I feel like, oh, I have to respond with this, when all the things that came to my brain in the moment are way better to say, right? At the same time, I like things to be super well choreographed, like you said, whether that's the show or the music or everything's in sync. Even if it's raw, it's organically raw together and not like rubbing each other the wrong way. if
Yeah,
that
but
makes
you
sense.
like the cohesive elements.
Yeah. So
you know.
all my career, I like fucking fought that. Like I want it to be super on and just technically great and cool, but all the cool moments are when I'm not in that mode and I'm just jamming.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a wasted opportunity, because you put so much time into that, and it could have been even more fun. Not that that wasn't fun, because when you did nail it, and you came out, and there's, and it was never about being better than another band, or because every performance has something great about it. But when the band comes out and it's a three-piece,
When you nail being unique,
yeah, and it's they not against them, but they just sounded like every other late '90s rock band.
Yeah,
and then we came out and did what really was only happening at that time on the big stage.
Yeah, right.
And to pull that off, and when we really did it right, and you see people's faces, and they're just like, "Holy shit!" That's just so
That was
different
another
and so
cool
much
level.
not better than the other band, but it's just something you're delivering, something that's just more. It's bigger. It's more fulfilling in the sound spectrum, the layers and the thickness, but what if every audience member didn't get off on that? So that was where it's kind of the lost art of just performing and engaging with the people in the audience. Is we had to assume every audience member was going to get off on what we were trying to do and hope that we delivered it. And it turns out it was like two people.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
What,
the
who
rest of the audience
appreciated
was
or
just wank off, man. When hey, drum solo, well, it's not fucking written on my list.
Yeah. It doesn't. Drum solo isn't until song 8.
Right. I only have 16 seconds before the synth kicks in for the next intro.
Exactly.
On the next song. There was no time to kind of engage in that, but like I said, when you nailed it, it was something more and bigger. Now everybody does it, right? And
back then too, it was I think I mentioned this on Stacy's episode that people wanted metal or country in Dallas.
They
didn't want
specific
in between or mixing genres. Like that wasn't a thing yet. Now it's just music. Nobody cares. But
no,
back then it was like, what are you trying to do?
What are you, a rap band?
Yeah.
What label are you?
Are you screaming? You did kind of a country slow song in there. I don't know what y'all are.
But that's what the audience. That was their mindset, right? And there are people out there that at a time when record labels were a real thing, their job was to know what that audience was like. And was always the part that killed me, that made me quit playing for so long when Core Factor died, because we go in the studio and we produce these, what I thought were fantastic versions of a couple of the songs. Send them off to the labels, and we've got Wind Up and a couple other labels that were interested, and then they just kind of disappeared. Well, and what was happening at that time is, here's Dallas, right? There's this Dallas has always had its own ecosystem for music, right? And it has its own ebb and flow, and you just had a couple of bands kind of break out and get signed nationally, which was Edgewater And
our buddy Ryan, Element 80.
Yeah.
I actually saw them play.
Yeah, and they were doing some great things.
A couple others at that same time.
Yeah, and ironically, the bass player for Edgewater went on to become really good friends with Ray, who we'll talk about later. So it's just the small
I'm
world.
excited about that. 6
The
degrees.
small, right? Yeah, but there was a 6 degrees of the audience too.
Yeah.
And the A&R reps were responsible for knowing what are those 6 degrees.
Right.
What are those 6 things, those 6 elements of a song that are going to make them go spend their $13. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of disappeared. Oh, we love this stuff. We're super interested. And then just radio silence. And then like a month later, we get a phone call and it's like, well, my senior manager has decided that we just aren't going to sign anybody out of Dallas. Because Edgewater, the plug was pulled halfway into the first tour.
Oh, really?
Element 80, they're on the road for a few months doing a bunch of stuff.
Well, essentially, I mean, it's a what have you done for me lately?
It didn't sell enough albums in the first 6 months. And if you didn't sell the right number in those first 6 months, unless there was a really
audience must not be there, so screw it.
Yeah, so abandon ship.
I mean,
cut their losses.
As a listener, as an audience, member, it sometimes takes a while for people to catch on, especially before technology.
Well, that's a great concept, right?
Yeah,
because you look at it and you go, okay, A&R rep's supposed to know the audience, right? Know what to sell the audience, but that's not really what happened.
Right.
What really happened for the greater part of 30 years from, early 80s till, maybe 10 years ago is the A&R reps told you what you were going to listen to.
Yeah.
And then they did a version of it that was 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and it got played on the radio so many times that you had to like it, or you had to turn the radio off, right?
Yeah.
And this was before digital airwaves, and so you're on. If you weren't digging,
it was
what
like
was on the
subliminal.
To your point, the script was flipped a little bit to whereas when we talk about some of these people on your list back in the day, record labels developed them. They paid for them to go on tour and put promo out there so they would catch on. But when our buddies and the bands that Bret's referencing, by that time, it was more like, okay, you have to go earn the following and then we'll invest money. It was a completely different model.
Yeah, and I still talk to Ryan some, not a lot, but he and I still communicate from time to time. And
Ryan was the drummer in Element 80, and
did I meet him?
Well, he was from Tyler.
From Tyler.
Well, they all were,
one
I
of
guess.
Daniel's gigs, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
So, the whole 6 degrees thing, right? When he was a young kid, like 16, 17, maybe 18, he would sub for Core Factor.
7 sons of ones and this and everything that's good is gone. Started for the glory from the peers.
Yeah.
The original drummer wasn't available.
Back when we were doing the college circuit at parties.
So Ryan would come in and play when Spencer couldn't from, something would work or whatever. And then I started subbing some from time to time.
Right.
And then that's when it finally evolved into me playing full time. But when Ryan and those guys split, they got like I don't remember what, like maybe a $300,000 advance. Right. And that's when you go buy all new gear and you buy your trailer and your new truck and your van and you spend all this money to get out on the road and become famous. And so what happens in those days, and you hear about it a lot with 30 Seconds to Mars, the big lawsuits and stuff.
Yeah.
A typical record deal is structured something like this. The record label gives in advance, say, $250,000 to the artist to record an album. The artist then records the album. Suppose that the album sells 500,000 copies at $10 each, yielding $5 million. The record label then takes their cut out of the $5 million, typically 85% of the total sales, leaving the artist with $750,000. But before the artist receives any payments, the label first deducts the advance. In addition, the record label recoups other costs such as recording costs, half the promotion costs, half the video costs, and tour support. This leaves the artist $425,000 in debt to the record label. And then this debt gets carried on to the next album, and the next album.
on a small scale, it was still happening too. So those guys go out, they do this advance, they go out to L.A., record a great album, and do some really cool stuff, get out on the road with Seven Dust, and then a few months into it, the label says, hey, we're not sending you any more money.
Yeah, so then you're stuck.
I hope you can, good luck finding gas money to get all your shit back to Dallas and lick your wounds. Oh, by the way, we're going to be sending you a letter because you now owe us $300,000.
Right. Or the difference, probably, right?
No, the whole thing. So if you didn't pay it off through
it's not
sale,
like prorated.
Well, yeah, they probably sold enough to pay some small
expenses.
Yeah.
But it was from their portion was pennies, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, now they're spending the next 20 years, paying the record label for something that they never even got.
Well, that's what makes
it's a win-win for the record label.
It is.
Let's see if we can't just brainstorm and find some creative alternatives that are win-win.
Win.
Yes, thank you, Pam.
And but you know what? That's one of the things that I am so glad that technology and the digital age has really been able to balance that, because those corporations or labels, whatever, that were controlling the industry, they don't have that much control anymore.
They'll get it back.
You think?
Yeah, because eventually they'll own all the streaming services and so on.
I think as long as digital and technology is around, there'll always be a better access to the underground than there ever was before.
Which is interesting, right? Because I feel like growing up watching Dad hustle all the time, start up businesses, win an audience, exactly, all the time. That's just in our nature to kind of hustle, which gives us a competitive advantage at times, or did in the past. So, in other words, before people could have access 24/7 to all kinds of cool stuff, it helped me to be able to go out and hustle and spin things up or learn a new technology and work that in our advantage. Before, now everybody can do it. It's almost like capitalist versus socialist a little bit, where right?
Now
like it's
so
all
cheap.
even playing.
Everybody gets in-ear monitors and backing tracks for free, basically. Now, here, everyone has them. Now go play.
Hi, I'm Jonas. Do you know what open source is? Well, let me explain it for you. Basically, it means that the recipe of any given work is shared and free for anybody to use. The essential benefits of open source are access to the source or recipe of any given work, free remix and redistribution of any given work, an end to predatory vendor lock-in, and a higher degree of cooperation. Open source is originally a software-related term. But let's take a non-technical example of where the open source mindset is actually used today. Here's Dave. He is a really passionate skateboarder. He loves the community because everyone shares tips and tricks openly. This means that everybody has access to the source of becoming a better skateboarder. Dave has the opportunity of remixing an existing trick and making it even better. He becomes more skilled, faster. In the skateboard community, you share new ideas and remix each other's tricks. You cooperate and reach much higher standards than any skateboarder could reach alone. Hopefully, you can now better understand the positive term open source and the principles within.
Which is kind of funny because on one side, it levels out a little bit, and now it's like, okay, nobody's above anybody, but yet it allows now for the ramp to really let talented people shine, because now they're not held back because they don't have the best gear anymore. So now you give people who don't have those options before those options and the ability. Front runners still come out. They still develop themselves.
At the end of the day, even as shitty as the record business was, and probably will forever be in whatever element that a company is controlling it versus the artist, talent always prevailed.
Yeah.
Right.
To a certain degree. But part of that talent, for me, was the show.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
The ability to go out there and present a spectacle and a sound that's bigger and larger than life, that was bigger than just those four guys on the stage. And that's where it all started for me.
A sound that could control the crowd. The showmanship of it. You're definitely a showman too. Like, not everybody is.
No, and I'll give you a real quick example, and then I'll kind of jump into why that's so important to me. Is, there's some great bands out there, and in today's world, right? This is not a podcast about who's the best drummer,
right?
That you have the old
exactly
the age old debate: was it John Bonham or Neil Peart, right? And that's probably a great discussion to have sometime. But the reality is that in today's world, there are so many freaks of nature.
Oh my gosh. And we just celebrate the differences, not a comparison of better than or,
And they're all good.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy.
But young people, too, like
and I
little
look back,
kids.
And that for me was one of the things that, I didn't have access to a lot of technical learning, if you will.
Right.
And so I just kind of, not purposefully or willfully moved away from it. It just, because it wasn't present and available, it wasn't important to me. It
wasn't a focus.
But now these kids come out there and they go, oh, how do I play, how do I play that drum pattern that Bonham's doing on Moby Dick? And they can pull it up on YouTube, and there's a guy showing them how to play it at 6 different tempos. It's transcribed at the bottom of the screen, so you can literally see every note, every rest, every aspect of that performance, and then they break it down and teach it to you. Well, when I was learning to play drums, what you did is you hit the stop button and the rewind button.
Yes, oh my God.
At the same time.
Yeah.
With the rewind just a little bit down so that you could rewind and then stop real quick.
Yep.
And it was like this, positioning of the two fingers that allowed you to rewind it exactly 4 seconds and stop it and then push play again. And when it worked, you got to go back and listen to this piece again. But most of the time, it didn't work. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, that was my only access to how do I learn that one little part. And
it's so time consuming.
You're completely limited to how was that album mixed. And if the drums weren't mixed out front and center, you couldn't even hear a lot of what was going on that was kind of the coolest parts. Whereas now these kids are learning all these coolest parts right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And most of the time you wouldn't even get half of those coolest parts because your speakers didn't play that spectrum.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even hear parts of it.
No, you're literally playing it on a little jam box.
Yeah.
Or a record,
Yeah.
Just, bumping the needle on the record back and forth. And today's world, same thing. Like everybody has this access to the digital technology to have these great performances. They also have access to all these technologies to break down and learn the true mechanics and techniques.
The logistics.
And when I was young, they said, hey, be sure to learn all your rudiments.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but that's not all that fun. So put on the AC/DC album again. And let me just play along to it. And so that became my default was let me do something that's performance-wise is really going to shine because maybe I don't have those technical chops. Not that I couldn't have learned those things.
Right.
I accepted not being able to.
You just didn't have the exposure to the knowledge at that time.
And then, and you did if you went to MI out in LA,
right?
And had all these great instructors teaching you all these great things. Well, now you can get that on the internet,
right?
But our brother John goes to LA and he's at MI and learning all these different types of music and different techniques and all the behind the scene things that make a player not only good but able to use it in a lot of different forums, right? So what happens is I'm playing, Motley Crue.
Right.
And it's just boom da ba doom da boom da boom boom da.
I want you, I need you, I want you to be my tonight.
And for my birthday, and this is like 1987, he sends me a cassette tape, and it's Billy Cobham's Glass Menagerie. It's like this amazing jazz guy, and it's like one of his crowning albums, in my opinion. Going back and listening now, it's just this amazing playing, but it's all heavy jazz influenced stuff. And John's like, "Hey, you learn this, then you can be really good." And I listened to it like 2 times, and I was like, "Fuck you!"
I want to twirl my sticks cool while I play this simple beat.
This Billy Cobham guy is not drinking tequila. There are no naked women on this album. I have no use for it.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, looking back, you go, you did all these missed opportunities to be technically a better player, and you still have those now. It's like even now, I have opportunity to learn stuff, and I don't know that I embrace it as much as maybe a lot of other players might, because that's kind of part of my DNA now. It's more important to me to just have this cool feel and the vibe and the presence and the performance and the presentation was just as important, and it started right from the very beginning.
Number 5, Peter Criss.
So I'm 6 years old, 1977. My older brother John,
of course,
his buddies, my cousin Cale, they were all, a little bit older, right? 7, 8 years older. And they're like, "We're going to the Kiss concert." And my dad's like, "Well, you're not going by yourself." And here I am. I'm 6 years old, and I'm like, "Hey, take me. I want to go." Big giant auditorium in Wichita, Kansas Coliseum, and Kiss walks out on stage.
You wanted the best and you got it. The hottest band in the land,
I bet it was so majestic.
You have no idea.
Especially at 6.
I know, right.
Especially at a time when you didn't see that anywhere.
Right. It wasn't
like
on
you
TV.
saw it. No,
It's like a UFO sighting,
Right.
basically.
You were just listening to records. There was no MTV. There was no.
It's almost like a play.
The only the only
opening.
visual aspect to music back then was Ed Sullivan's show. Johnny Carson.
That
when
or
they
like
had-
the album covers, but
Right, and that was pretty much it. And that's live albums were a big deal back then, right? So, so I'm 6 years old. I'm in the middle of this giant Coliseum. We're way up in the nosebleed section, and you see these lights and fire. And then halfway through the thing, Peter Criss is playing a drum solo, and he's on this big giant stage, with these big caps imprinted on the thing. The drum tone starts rising up into the air. He's playing this killer solo. There's what to me at 6 years old were like fucking nuclear bombs going off.
I know it's so like
the pyrotechnics. The impact of that moment. I'm 6 years, and I said, I want to do this for the rest of my life.
I know.
I want you to tell me, what do you want to do with your life? I want to rock!
I want to be that guy right there. That's what I want to do. But it wasn't just the vibe of the drum, but it was the show, right? It was this presentation. And so Peter Criss was like the big first major influence for me. And this is obviously what I would say is good playing. Looking back 30 years later, the sound of what he did for the band and what he represented for those songs, there was no way it could have been better.
Right.
But technically he wasn't, a fabulous drummer. But what he did was put on this show as part of Kiss. And that's also part of for me being a drummer and what influenced me as a drummer was also this idea of a band.
Band. Noun. A group of musicians united for a common purpose.
You see it, it was like these 4 guys and they're married.
Basically, yeah.
You know, I thought they all lived together.
Yeah.
Ate at McDonald's together.
I have a comic book I drew when I was a kid, probably 6 years old. It's like Kiss, basically superheroes that are musicians, but they all lived in a mansion together. That's
Right.
what they did.
That's what I thought it was. It was like this family thing, right? It was these 4 guys are a band and they'll be together for the rest of their lives. And so not only was Peter a big influence, just it made me say, yeah, the drums are for me, right? Because I had guitars fucking blaring in my ears all day, every day, my entire life.
But so the drums are what actually like spoke to you.
Yeah, you just
from that moment.
Feel that kick drum. Just those thunderous
How it
sounds.
reverberated through you.
But then I saw that as that's part of a band, right? And his drumming was great. You know, you listen to the solo of 100,000 Years. Obviously, you know, stuff like the Dr. Love. All these cool licks. They weren't technically great, but he was a good player. He fit the sound of the band. But to me, he fit the band, right? He was the guy that played drums for this band. He wasn't just a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to me, that was what I first latched onto. Wasn't, hey, how does he play that? You know, was that a paradiddle? I didn't give a fuck about that. I was like, he's having the time of his life.
Yeah, it's literally
with
like
his best friends.
He was the
Right.
engine, right? And
Yeah.
I don't care about all the inner workings of it. I just know when I push the gas, it sounds really cool.
Yes. When you get in a Corvette, you already know what it's going to be like. And when those guys hit the stage, you knew that it was about to be this larger than life performance.
Experience.
I didn't care what he played.
Yeah.
So I think, in some ways that's damaging, right? Because I spent my whole career playing drums going, I don't really care what I play. As long as it fits the song and I look cool doing it, that was more important for a lot of those years.
Also, talk about living up to expectations. This is a lot to live up to as a 6-year-old. Like, that's what I have to be as a musician. It's got to be that big and cool.
That's what I thought it was. I literally thought you learn how to play drums, and then soon after, you'll be on the stage with all these pyrotechnics.
The simplification of a 6-year-old mind.
That's
or
what I
a
thought it was.
40-year-old mind.
Well,
still the same thing. It's
yeah.
like if it just sounds cool, then I'm there.
Yeah, and so that was the biggest initial influence that made me just go, I want to be Peter Criss.
That's a funny time for any kid also, because that's like you're on this identity hunt, You're trying to figure out who you are, and you're connecting with things. Like, I connect to that. That's who I am. I'm like that. Like that. I'm not like that. I'm like this, and then that becomes your thing. And music just does that.
I don't want to be a drummer. I want to be that guy. I want to be that drummer.
Was John playing at all by then? Do you remember? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're already kind of around it just a little bit?
Yeah, he had already started playing, and Cale was playing drums.
Okay. I did not remember that.
So you were exposed then.
They would get together and buy some dry ice, put on Kiss costumes and the makeup.
Awesome.
And go to the to the VW club.
Yeah.
And do a Kiss concert.
Yeah.
And there was no, there was a couple of lights that you buy at the, at the hardware store, right? Mm-hmm. And bought some colored bulbs or tried to spray paint them or some
right.
shit, but they had this dry ice in a bucket in the middle of the stage, and very small, tiny amount of what appeared to be smoke coming out, and I was like, see, they're doing it.
Yep.
It was so fantastical.
These guys are already doing it.
Yeah, it looks so simple to you, right?
There wasn't a big leap from.
Because you saw in your mind's eye that same concert.
Like you matrixed, yeah.
I saw them go, hey, I'm going to play drums. Oh, I'm going to play guitar. I'm going to play bass. And they started doing it, and 6 months later, they had dry ice.
It's always been about dry ice.
This is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, they're almost there. I mean, they probably need to print some tour shirts, get a good manager. They're off to the fucking races. So 2 years later,
That's
1979, I go see another Kiss concert, and it just sealed the deal. It's like Peter Criss is the greatest drummer on earth. And he wasn't. But for a 8-year-old kid, he was the greatest drummer on earth because he was representing that you could live this amazing king-like status by just smacking some shit with some sticks.
It's very like...
He's not even doing anything that special.
These guys are trying to play guitar. You see that they're using like, all their fingers.
He's like, I can just beat this like...
Yeah. No, I did. That's exactly what I was doing. So I had Dad buy me like a little toy drum set. And
It's like one of the oldest forms of music.
And I just demolished it. The first time he ever videoed me on the old Super 8 film, right? Yep. He videos me playing drums, and I have a Kiss song playing in the background, and I didn't even hit the drums. I was just swinging the sticks in the air around it, playing like I was playing drums. And to me, that was good enough. I'd already made it. I was now Peter Criss. I literally was not even making contact on the drums because I was trying to look cool because it was being videotaped. Yeah. So I was trying to, the right facial expressions.
Yeah.
Like if I start trying to hit
wait,
these
there's
things,
certain facial expressions?
Oh, yeah, totally. If I start actually hitting these drums, it's going to really distract me from doing all the stuff that makes this really cool. And you can see him in the background yelling at me like, hit the fucking drums! And I'm like swinging in the air, looking cool, right?
It didn't help, though, that we had a mother that could go and literally sew costumes that looked exactly like
that was
the costumes
so
that
much
they
more
wore.
common back then too. Like people, that skill.
As practicing Zen Buddhists, we at Boombox try to be here now and live in the moment as often as possible. Yet sometimes we don't realize the emotional significance of a moment until we reflect back on those experiences later in life. So here's a moment in time that helped shape the musician and person I am today. To be an artist oftentimes means to be misunderstood. I think it's extremely important for people, especially family and friends, to accept others, artists, as they are and not immediately jump to conclusions just because they dress funny or listen to music you think is strange. And my mother was the best I've ever seen at making people feel loved, wanted, or even just accepted to all of her children. And I mean children in the larger sense, as there were 3 generations of musicians that came in and out of our home, and everyone knew they would always be welcomed with open arms. I was fortunate to see this example in motion from a very early age. The band Kiss was very influential to our family, and instead of complaining or worrying, our mom spent her own time and energy on sewing Kiss costumes for us all to wear together. Her attention to detail allowed us to transform into something larger than life, and it had a huge impact on me. I not only thought the image, the brand, before we called it that, of a band was incredibly important, but also achievable with just a little money and a bit of effort. This idea never left me throughout my music career, and I owe a large part of that to this special moment in time.
Yeah,
able to do that.
Well, but in just that her ability to be able to take something and just transfer it. Like she didn't. You could speaking
Almost
of being
like
able to get on the
painting, someone who
internet
can
and look
just, like-
stuff
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
There was no that. She just had to look at it and go, well, yeah, I'll just sketch this out and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And then there we were, all dressed up like Kiss. We were them.
That's
It's
so-
not,
That's what I'm
again,
saying.
it's not a big jump.
She made it look so easy
Yeah,
too.
everything
from
was
her
so easy. Brett.
perspective.
He's like,
yeah.
yeah, this is awesome.
I got it made.
I had costumes. I knew people that had access to dry ice. I wasn't old enough to buy it, but I knew people that could do it.
That's
And to me, that was enough. So to me, even today, Peter Criss is the greatest drummer on earth. But he technically wasn't that great. He was good.
Yeah.
And he was perfect for that band, which is why when you see when they kind of transitioned, later in the 80s to try to stay with the changing of the music scene, it was good that Ace and Peter got fired.
Right.
Right, because they could have never made that leap, and he could have never been Eric Carr. Eric Carr took over, and it was just a completely different sound in so many different ways. And so, to me, that was disheartening. I was like, oh my God, Peter's gone. But that's the rub, right, of the showmanship versus technical chops, and technical chops keep you going.
Yeah, right.
And so you had to do it. So I had to eventually, recognize that and go back and get on the practice pad and work on my technical capabilities. But it was really a number of years into playing before that was something that I was even remotely concerned about.
Yeah. So you played by ear then mostly.
That was, and it's unfortunate, right? Because I had enough talent that I could go put on AC/DC record or Motley Crue or Judas Priest. And to a certain degree, could play anything that they were playing on those albums.
Right.
Now, did I play it as well? Probably not, right? Did I play all the parts, and did I even know what all the parts were? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I could play it, and if you weren't a great technical drummer, and you were a 14-year-old girl,
like, if you could recognize
you thought
it, then
I
that
played
was good.
everything exactly the same, right? And that was, and again, that was good enough to me.
I remember being that girl.
He played everything exactly like the song.
Sounded
no,
so...
not really.
And so as years went by, I got a good drum set that my dad bought for me, and started actually playing, learning, and I was able to play really well for a young kid who had no real, I played
like training.
I had played high school band, so I knew I could talk the talk. I knew, what the song structures were and the different components, and I could kind of piece it together.
Yeah.
And to me, that was good enough.
Were you in band in high school?
Only, only I think the first year. And then they came out and were like, "Hey, if you want to be in band, you have to cut your hair."
What?
And I was like, man, I really would like to learn to play drums better because I want to be a drummer. But again,
I want to be a rock drummer, and they have.
I
long
wanted to be a
hair, so-
rock star more than I wanted to be a good drummer.
funny.
Yeah,
and so that was that theme was a huge part of that whole evolution.
You know what's funny too, Peter Criss, it's funny the different perspectives, right? And so you saw that in him. Me coming up even younger than that and being the hopeless romantic that I've always been since day one, I gravitated towards things like Beth.
We just can't find the sound. Just a few more hours, and I'll be right home to you. I think I hear them calling. Oh, Beth, what can I do? Beth, what can I do?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember Beth, but it's this slow orchestral piano-based song that was a Kiss song, but Peter Criss sang on it.
Yeah.
But it was much more of a like, what's the guy who sings Mandy?
Barry Manilow. What a joke.
So stupid.
And boring as hell. Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, he's got like one good song.
Yeah, I mean, Mandy is not terrible. Yeah, the opening's okay. I love Barry Manilow. Oh my God, he's the best!
I have everything he's ever recorded.
Me too.
Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow.
It was like a Barry Manilow song or something, really.
Funny.
No, and he even looks a little like Barry Manilow, quite honestly, which I've never realized that till now. But it was, to this day, it's their biggest hit. And there was no drums.
He's like, I hated that song. Boycott it.
But I didn't because Peter was singing it. If Paul was singing that song, it would have been the worst song they ever recorded.
Right.
All of a sudden, now the drummer is the star.
Like the star.
Yeah, he's on stage by himself with 16,000 kids screaming. And I think...
Roses being thrown up on stage.
Panties.
Yeah. And so, again, just continuing to reaffirm this idea of, I want to be that guy. I don't care if I can play good. I want to be that guy.
Even like Black Diamond, to me, so Black, here, Chris, let me just play this little piece of this so you can hear what I mean. So you know how you see people that they make a joke in Wayne's World, they do this, where they start to play the Led Zeppelin tune. What is it? My brain's not working today. You know, I was just playing it for you the other day, the little guitar picking.
Oh, Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're in a music store, you sit down, a guitar player is going to play Stairway to Heaven, right?
Yeah.
That joke.
No stairway. Denied.
For me growing up, this was my Stairway to Heaven.
Still the best song live.
So good.
What song is that?
Black Diamond.
It's just like something I would have wanted to listen to, yeah.
But what changes in a moment is what's, to me, this is the cool thing. What happens at the end of this nice, pretty lullaby?
The explosion.
Yep. You can literally see the mood of us out on the street at night.
Yeah, got me under the thumb. Motherfuckers.
Yep.
Hit it.
The power.
Oh, that's superhero music.
Yeah, totally.
We're here to save the day.
You can totally see that being on like The Flash.
Yes. But listen. Again, that's Peter Criss, the drummer. It's not even Paul or Gene.
Yeah.
He sounds like the coolest metal vocalist that there is.
I know, so
for back then.
Who sang with that gruff, raspy voice back then? You know, and again, here's this guy. He's just, to me, was silently the big star of the stage the whole night.
Yeah.
You know,
despite his,
obviously that wasn't the case to millions of other people, right? Because they're keyed in on the guitar player, singing, but to me, this guy was. Like those moments were what the whole thing was all about. But again, it was not just him, it was this band, right? There's this element, this force to be reckoned with. Mm-hmm. And then as I get a little bit older, you start seeing all these great bands, and there's so many bands out there, but back then you only had access to a sample of it, right?
Right.
And so only every now and then could you access something different. And I went on a school trip to Austin for student council.
Oh, funny.
And here I am, long blonde hair, and I'm on a bus full of nerds. And we go to Austin, and we have part of the day free, and I walk directly into a record store on 6th Street. And I walk in.
Funny.
I walk up to the record stands. You know how they have them all, kind of stacked up there, alphabetical. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I walk up, the first thing I see is this solid black album. And it had a pentagram on it. And I went,
that's the most awesome thing ever.
I don't know what these guys play, but this has to be the coolest fucking band on earth.
That's the exact thought I had when I first saw that album cover. Obviously, much later.
Yeah.
But I had just as powerful as a reaction.
Well,
to something
part
so
of being a
simple.
rock star or a performer was anti-social, right?
Yeah.
It was, how can I be just a little different than everybody else because I can do that because I'm a fucking rock star, right? And so you had that mindset of, I want the most outlandish shit that I can find.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got older, I find that fucking Black Album, Pentagram, and I'm thinking, now, finally, we got something to work with here. And I take it home.
Something interesting.
I take it home and play it, and of course, you first listen to that stuff, and you're like, oh, it's so raw and animalistic,
dirty
and what's this guy singing like he's smoking helium pipes or something?
Vince Neil, baby.
And I'm like, this is pretty cool. But then I saw them on MTV.
Oh, yeah.
You see that, and then you see Tommy Lee.
Oh my God, that hair!
I know, right? It's like a human, like a human Q-tip.
Yeah.
Skinny rail going up and this big poofy thing at the top.
I do remember.
But he had this cool Mighty Mouse tattoo.
Oh, how funny!
In case you ever wondered how the Mighty Mouse tattoo showed up on me, I did that back in the '90s, early '90s.
Oh, that's what that's from? I didn't even know that.
He had Mighty Mouse punching his way out of a bass drum on his shoulder before he had 10,000 other tattoos. But I see these guys come out, and already I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
They're in costumes. They have makeup on.
It was literally like a post-apocalyptic movie come to the stage.
Well, keep in mind, late 70s.
It's like a Broadway show, but
right, late 70s, early 80s. So what did you have? You have Kiss with these costumes and fire and blood and explosions, and then you had Billy Joel. And I liked listening to Billy Joel, right? It was great songs, great melodies. I still love a good melody. That's not a band. A band is supposed to be four guys that walk down an alley and kick everyone's ass and then bleed on them. I don't even know if they do it in that order, right? I don't even think it matters at that point. They might just bleed on everyone, and that just kind of looks like what happened.
That's all. That covers all the bases,
right? But there's like it's a gang, right? So that was the transition.
Yeah,
of it's not just band. This is like a fucking motorcycle gang.
Yeah, it's a posse.
These guys are loud, rude, obnoxious, and they're playing kick-ass music. You listen to those drums, it's big thunderous drums. It's like, hey, drums matter, right? See, check this out. They're so cool they start the song with it.
Because that was my first introduction too. Like I remember seeing Too Young to Fall in Love, the video, and well, it wasn't my first introduction to Motley Crue, but seeing them, I had stared at the album cover forever. But then you watch them going down the street, fighting people, winning the hot Asian princess.
Yeah,
they didn't have to follow any rules.
Yeah,
these guys were the next thing for me, right? So, and Tommy Lee was, even to this day, I listen back to some of that early stuff, especially the very early stuff. Starry Eyes and the original version, when they go into Livewire and Piece of Your Action, those first couple albums were his best playing, in my opinion.
Yeah, so
because he was just having fun. He was just writing.
Well, that first
really
album
cool stuff.
to me, what's it called? Too Fast for Love.
Yeah, Too Fast for Love.
To me, I always viewed it. I've always felt like I kind of came from the 50s, like I was reincarnated from the 50s, like doo-wop band or something. And so I've always had this, I've gravitated towards that style. And that first album to me had like this 50s
influence.
Old school, like gang, but 50s style gang, like Outsiders, you know, that old novel and movie.
Oh, yeah. Stay Gold, Pony Boy.
Pointy Bow.
Stay
Pony
Gold,
Boy.
Pointy Boy.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
Stay Gold, Pony Boy.
Pointy Boy.
Now I'll never be able to say that phrase ever
Stay
again without
gold,
saying
Pointy
Pointy Boy.
But you know what I mean? It was like a more innocent version of the gang where they were going to fight, but everybody was going to live. It's going to be fine. It's just
they weren't out to shake somebody. They were just going to come to fisticuffs.
But there was a romanticism on that first album.
Oh, especially in Nicky's lyrics. You know, and he's writing a lot about himself, which you don't really realize until many years later. You know, Frankie died, blah, blah, blah. Well, his name was Frankie. His father's name was Frankie.
Right.
You know, so there was a lot of poetic infusion of
emotion, too.
Right. These guys were taking on the world, and they had something to say. But then they turn into this monster version of it when you get to Shout at the Devil, right? And... You know, looking back at it now. Do you think that's when
the drugs and the alcohol and the touring and all that just kind of really became...
I think that was all Nicky, right? And I think Nicky had a vision of what this band is going to be when he was 12 years old. And he was just biding his time until he got to the point where he met the three guys that were going to make that happen.
Yeah.
And Tommy was a little younger and was, you know, a fan of Nicky's when Nicky played for London.
Yeah.
Before London broke up, and that's when he and Nicky got together, right? So I think he was kind of idolizing, and so I think he was just kind of trying to portray what this rock star thing is supposed to be, and he just kind of sunk into it real hard, right?
Yeah.
They all did.
Don't any of you have that gas to play for blood?
I'm your Huckleberry.
Nicky had somebody finally who was ballsy enough to just go do whatever
and not give a fuck about the repercussions
to kind of carry that vision out.
Right.
It's like borderline anarchist, you know?
It's like, you know, if you're alone, you're probably not going to break into that house and steal the VCR. But when your buddy's going, hey, let's break into that house and steal the VCR.
Something like, about that becomes far more appealing.
Oh, hell yeah, let's do that.
You have the young punk that likes to beat on the skins like Bret does because the girls think it's cool. He's like, okay, I'll go in there and steal that VCR.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because that's probably what a rock star would do.
Yeah, exactly.
Matter of fact, when I steal the VCR, then I'm going to throw the motherfucker out the window.
Yeah.
Because that's what a real rock star would do.
You want to know what life on the road's really like? For me, every day went something like this. 5 p.m. Phone rings, wake up. Remember nothing. 7:30 p.m. Hang out backstage, drink, come back to life. Hey, Tom. Hey, what up, man? Meet record and radio creeps. Listen to them ask, do you remember pissing on that cop car last night? No. 9:30 p.m. Showtime. Adrenaline kicks in. 10:30, drum solo in a giant spinning steel cage. Wow!
He didn't even want the VCR. He just wanted to destroy it.
He just wanted to, take it and destroy it.
Yeah, this was not Robin Hood. We're not trying to help someone else out by being evil. We were just going to be evil for evil's sake.
Yeah.
And the pentagram and this. And evil to me at that time wasn't, you know what, a lot of 35-year-old soccer moms thought was these guys are satanic. It was never that to me in any way, shape, or form. It was, hey, this is finally somebody that saw Kiss.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the first band that finally realized what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yep.
You're supposed to have costumes and makeup and fire and blood.
Make it a production and make it worth going.
And then they kind of lived up to that off stage too, right?
I had managed the Scorpions, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Kiss. I had been dragged through the deepest shit with all kinds of mentally ill people. But I've never been through what Motley Crue put me through.
Just got off stage. Well, Gene would have sex with somebody, but then he would go work on the financials and figure out how to do the next thing. Motley Crue was getting in fights with other bands and, just waking up.
Just raising hell in general.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't worried about where the money was going to come from next time.
No, it was literally just how do we fight the whole world?
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. I mean, and so that's when it kind of transitioned from, hey, here's this thing. It's just like Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
It's larger than life. But it's not a band. It's a fucking gang.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I went from wanting to be the drummer in a band. I wanted to now be the crazy guy in a gang. Who played drums, and that's what allowed me to do all those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, it's not illegal for me. I play drums.
It's okay. I'm a drummer.
How could this be bad? And I was a wild kid. I probably wasn't as wild as Tommy Lee, right? But I wanted to be. There was a part of me that wanted to be.
Brett's breaking into girls' bedrooms, and the fathers come in, and he's like, no, it's okay. I'm a drummer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a tip.
I flipped my car outside in the ditch. It was okay. I'm a drummer.
Oh, by the way,
I jumped off of a bridge and broke my jaw. It's okay. I'm a drummer.
I'm not going to laugh. I wanted to laugh because it was funny. I'm not going to laugh because those are all actually true stories.
Yep. I've heard.
But so at an early age, I thought, well, to be good like Tommy Lee, I have to live like Tommy Lee, right?
Extravagant, but also like on the edge.
Chicken or egg, right?
Authority. Mm-hmm.
Was he crazy because he was the drummer in this crazy ass band? Or was he the band so crazy because of this crazy ass drummer?
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
And so that was the foray into, hey, I still want this big theatrical thing, but I want it to be aggressive and not violent for violence sake, but violent because I could do it because I'm a drummer.
Yeah, dangerous.
Right, and I'm allowed to do that.
Drumming, if you think about what
It's physical. There's a physical element to it.
And it requires a power and, yeah.
And on stage, you get to control everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You control the ebb and flow of the music and the people.
Yes.
The environment.
And so that to me was just part of it. So the more I could be like that, then I could, I can now I want to be Tommy Lee. Peter Criss is
look
Peter
how
Criss
he
got fired.
Controls the audience, controls the narrative, really controls everything about that situation just by playing the drums.
Yep.
Not doing anything technical again, but look how I'm playing it.
Yeah, and that was to me where it kind of really lashed me in because now I realized, well, wait, you can also do some really cool stuff.
Yeah,
like you can play
tricks.
Like you can play stuff that's a little more complicated than Peter Criss, and that's kind of cool because all of a sudden now you had this crazy guy, and looking back in today's world, is he in the top 25 greatest drummers of all time? Probably not because of his skill, though.
Yeah, right.
It's his persona, right?
It's the notoriety.
But he did have enough skill,
yes,
to back it up. To back it up.
That's exactly right. And we did a Moment in Time episode with Nate and Ash, Chris's brother and sister-in-law, and we were talking about people changing bands and whether if you replace members and things like that. And Tommy Lee came up as somebody that, even though he's not singing, you can tell just by the sound of the instruments and how it's coming across when he plays those instruments.
His energy.
His impact.
Yeah.
And like a good example to me is this. Even in later years, So fast forward, and I'm in high school, and one of the albums that I just ran into the dirt was the self-titled Motley Crue album.
Yeah.
To this day, one of the coolest drum sounds I've ever heard. And here, I'll give you an example. Do you remember this one?
Oh, Hooligan's Holiday.
Yeah.
To me, one of their best albums ever, right? But it wasn't Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have Vince Neil. But John Corabi...
Probably should have, which we talk about.
Yeah.
A little bit of technical to back it up, but listen to the sound of the instruments, the fills that he does.
He does this little, the quad thing, where it's just like...
Stomping up a storm, lines of hell on a face. Red apples crawling through the night, busting loose, run away.
I mean, you walk into a show and someone's playing that, you're
immediately
like,
I'm
whoa,
captivated.
This
yeah.
dude is commanding a presence.
Yeah.
Well, and he played hard too, right? You know,
Yeah,
the guy
did.
pounded like a freaking animal.
He pounded everything in life. Pamela Anderson will attest to that.
Yeah, and he can back that up too.
That's why she needed
Exactly.
implants to pad the pounding.
You know, generally it's not a good idea to click on any internet offers that you haven't requested. What was the exact offer?
It was for a video,
Yeah, what kind of video?
a celebrity sex tape.
Really? What kind of celebrity?
It's not relevant.
How much you pay for it?
Not relevant.
You paid for it?
It all happened so fast.
Yeah, before the, the Pamela Anderson video.
Yeah.
Yep.
I go see Motley Crue open for Aerosmith, and in the middle of the show, Tommy has his own camera back there behind his drum set, and he literally just takes his dick out and flops it down on a snare drum into this camera. And it's on this big giant screen.
Oh
so it's
my
like, it's
God.
not bad enough that this guy's already got a huge penis, right?
Is it
Now
really?
this-
I've never seen
Now
it.
this penis
Now I want to check it
was
out.
approximately...
It commands
I don't
a
know.
presence too.
Yeah, it now went
Like
from
20
being...
feet long.
No, worse. This was like Jumbotron, right?
Oh my God.
So
Yeah,
this guy
150
now all of a
feet.
sudden has a penis that was probably 130, 140
Like a
feet long.
space shuttle.
Oh my God, that's funny.
And that's when I knew I couldn't be Tommy Lee.
I gotta play these drums even harder.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But that's, you mentioned some of the sounds and stuff he does. He did a lot of little hi-hat and cymbal washes, even early on the stuff, the stuff on like
Yeah.
Live Wire. On the little breaks where he does the little cymbal wash and all these and all that
Little stops at the cowbell.
Yeah, all the hi-hat sizzle stuff he does in the breakdown.
Oh yes.
Peter Criss didn't do that. So it was like another notch up, not only in just decadence, but it was another notch up in playing too. And that's when I went, okay, I want to be Peter Criss. Now I want to be Tommy Lee, but now I want to be good.
Yep.
Right? Because
Well, at that time too, I feel like because for a long time the whole learning things and nerdy people was not embraced, right?
Yeah.
And knowledge, you were a nerd if you pursued knowledge. But I feel like right about the time, or maybe shortly after they got popular, like it really became a driving force with a lot more people, like the interest in it, but it was also in the nerds and the intelligent people and the ones who are out to learn, more technique and style or different styles even, were starting to be more embraced. It started to become cool to be the nerdy, knowledgeable person about your craft, you know?
Well, and he had some things that were just different too, right? At that time, there just wasn't a lot of loud bands playing double bass stuff. Like, man, this guy's really good. And it's probably not that technical, right, if you were going to grade it, but it was just good. And it was fast and loud, and he's playing with 2 feet, and I'm thinking...
And highlighted, too, like, a lot of, you mentioned before, drum sounds in a lot of bands are kind of muted. They're not as much.
Yeah, they're a
forefront.
backbeat. They're underneath a little bit.
Right. They're not as easy.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you can't
ascertain.
ignore it.
No,
yeah, exactly. Like it's in your face.
Yeah, he's no longer supporting a guitar pattern.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing right on top of it.
Yeah.
And so a lot more syncopation.
Mm-hmm.
And tight stops and the double bass, and I'm like, oh.
And then now all of a sudden you're doing that while you're turning 360 in a box, 300 feet above a crowd.
It started with me as a kid sitting on the floor, standing on the seat, watching I think it was Ted Nugent and Pat Travers and I'm sitting there. And I'm watching Tommy Aldrich, who's another drummer, who's quite a badass. And I'm watching him just murder shit on the drums. And I'm looking around, and I see people going to get a beer, going to buy a t-shirt, going to the bathroom. I'm like, this is bullshit. And it hit me right then that the reason people are losing interest or breaking away for the drum solo is here's this guy, got big, crazy, curly hair, and he's just wailing, but he's behind this wall of drums, and you can't really, at the end of the day, see what he's doing. You can't see what his feet are doing. Every once in a while, you see a stick flying, but that's about it. You can't really see what's going on. And he's murdering shit. And I was like, I gotta figure out a way where people can see what's going on. I'm like, if they could only see from behind what was happening. So, God, this is the first Motley drum riser was this rig that tilted up from your audience perspective, because I wanted to give them basically they'd be looking down, a bird's eye view of what's really going on. You can see your feet going, you can see what the guy's actually doing. And that's what started this whole nightmare, was I was just trying to figure out a way to let people in behind the drum wall. I think we achieved it.
Right. So the showmanship went to another level, but the playing did too. I mean, he was not one of the most technically talented drummers of the 80s,
but creative.
But he could do some really cool stuff.
Unique.
And the stuff he did really well.
Yeah, right.
He didn't get outside of his box. He knew where his lane was, but his lane was quite a bit larger than Peter Criss.
Yeah.
So was his penis.
Penis Chris.
Yeah. And a guy named Peter, and then you get a guy named Tommy has the Peter.
The bigger Peter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed, especially the spectacle.
Good job.
Yeah.
Not skipping out on that.
Part 1 of Under the Influence with my brother Bret. One thing I thought was really funny to me is, I talked about realizing that I was part of this special network,
The Inner Circle.
And I remember I can't remember how old I was, but listening to Bret play Home Sweet Home from Motley Crue on the piano.
You know I'm a dreamer, but my heart's of gold. I had to run away high, so I wouldn't come home low. Just when things went right, it doesn't mean they were always wrong. Just take this song and you'll never be left all alone. Take me to your heart, feel me in your bones. Just one more night
and that was just one of the staples in our family growing up. Everybody knew how to play that song.
Yeah.
But that he was a drummer that was sitting there playing it and singing, and I was like, you know, obviously it's much different nowadays, but when you know, this is late 70s, early 80s,
That's
where
like
I'm
a
like,
feat, first of all.
Yeah.
Like, I have a hard enough time just singing. Like, I have to, not that it's that difficult for me, but when I think about picking up an instrument and trying to sing at the same time, like, I can't sing and do my job at the same time.
Right.
Like, you would think that it's not that difficult, but it is. Like, I forget the lyrics, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds funny, do my job, but I sit at a computer all day to do my job, so it seems passive, but it's not. So I can imagine, I can't imagine playing drums. Like, some of the other instruments are a little bit
no, he was
more...
playing the piano.
Oh, piano.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that tangent doesn't even matter then.
Well, that too. I've always thought that was. I can play the guitar and sing, and I can play the drums a little bit. But if I try to sing and do that at the same time, it's very. But same kind of thing, right? Piano takes.
It's complex.
You got several things going on, but
I know you got the feet thing and the hands thing, and
but that not being his natural instrument, and not even as on the melodic side as the rest of us playing, you know, guitar and bass. It blew me away a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of further encouraged me to be like, yeah, I can just play all these instruments, which is what I kind of grew up doing.
Yeah.
'Cause, well,
it was making
that
the
guy's playing
connection.
this and he doesn't do that.
Yeah. Well, also that ushered in a kind of new way of thinking too, I feel like, because for a long time it seemed like the mentality was, this is what you play.
Yeah.
And then, like, this is your thing. Like, you don't, you know, step much outside of this role. Nowadays, you have people who, like you said, have realized their capabilities, and especially if they know how to read music, then they're like, oh, I can actually play multiple instruments, you know, as long as I can figure out how to maneuver them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the rest of it, you know, is easier for them. And it's different than singing by itself, though.
Yeah.
Because you're having to use other body parts to accomplish this.
Body parts.
But I can't even use my mouth body part right now.
That's been our whole approach, though. It's no wonder that I would want to play multiple instruments too, because I want to. It's not enough to just do one. Like,
no, you like options. You always like options. You're never happy or content with just one.
Yeah, yeah.
Or even one type.
You can't play this thing all the time because what about those things?
Yeah, there's too many other things to experience.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Mark wants some of all of it.
So, for Boombox Music Talk, I'm Mark.
And I'm Krish.
And we urge you to be like water.
And go with the flow.
And go with the flow.
And go with the flow. This has been a Wizard Studios production.
What value do you currently bring to my relationship?
Purely entertainment.
Oh.
Which is really all I've ever done for the family, I think, over the years.
That's all I've looked for. You can be an audience and a couple of sticks. I made something of it.